Hi guys, welcome back. I hope everyone has been enjoying more time with their studies in the Word. And thanks for all the support for my channel here. If you'd like to help get the word out, be sure to hit the thumbs up and subscribe, because it helps with the algorithms. I suppose since I've got so many newcomers here, I should just introduce myself by saying that I am a female and I'm getting up there in years. I've always had a very deep voice, and I actually quite like it. I feel it adds a bit of mystery. Today I'm going to continue with more fun, mind-bending findings in the heavens, continuing from my last videos, and ending with John's Revelation chapter 15 sign in heaven. Since so many don't watch past videos, I'll try to do a super fast recap of some of what I've shown so far before we move on. And then people can go back to my last few videos and see what they missed. There's just no way I could go through it all in one video. I also have a very basic timeline posted on my community page. And because hindsight is always 20/20, it mostly covers the past 7 years, and only going up to the Great American Eclipse. I can't see the future, so I'm not going over anything beyond the eclipse of April 8th. I don't even want to guess what the future will bring after that point. So far, I've talked a lot about these 3 eclipses, and where they all enter and exit the U.S., and what I think it all means with references from the Bible. To me, one of the other most significant events and signals we've had was the blood moon of November 8th of 2022. The place where the moon traversed during that blood moon also marked the exact place that the sun traversed during the 3 days that Jesus was in the tomb. And as I've shown on Stellarium, on the day that Jesus had risen, the sun was at that first hind foot of Aries. I like using the artwork on Stellarium because I find it very helpful in getting a more precise location of just where the sun and moon and planets are on any given date. If you haven't seen Acru Symphony's videos, she does great work. This is what her channel looks like, so surf over and watch her stuff. In a recent video, she was pointing out that this exact same blood moon, and even the fact that it was eclipsing Uranus, happened on the same date exactly 84 years prior. The name for the planet Uranus is also a Greek word, Uranos, meaning heaven, which in the New Testament is used 284 times. It feels so profound that during the blood moon of November 8th, 2022, this planet named Heaven was totally eclipsed during the event. And as Acru Symphony's channel alerted us to, the exact same thing happened on the same date 84 years ago. And the very next night was the famous Kristallnacht, or Night of Broken Glass, in 1938 against the Jews and their businesses, buildings, and synagogues, and also resulted in the deaths of hundreds of Jews. Historians believe that this was a major prelude event to the Holocaust. I found that all very interesting, what our sister friend Acru Symphony pointed out. So yeah, these blood moons happened in exactly the same place as the sun was during the 3 days that Jesus was in the tomb. The sun and the moon traveling through the same area on God's clock which is beneath the feet of Aries the ram, or lamb. So we've got this 84-year connection here with these blood moons eclipsing Uranus, the word for heaven in the New Testament. And as many may know, the planet Uranus has an 84-year orbit, but it's still incredible that this planet would be eclipsed by a blood moon on this very spot. Another connection here is that in the Gospel of Luke, chapter 2, when Jesus was first presented at the temple on his 8th day to be circumcised, it is written in verses 36 and 37 that there was one Anna, a prophetess, who was a widow of about 84 years, which departed not from the temple. Very telling that Uranus, one of God's great prophets, or prophetess, in the heavens, has an 84-year orbit. And with these blood moons exactly 84 years apart, and seemingly having direct connections to the Jews, and the idea of heaven being eclipsed in that very spot, marking on God's clock the 3 days that Jesus was in the tomb. And this idea of Anna, who never left the temple, being a widow for 84 years. And it just reminds me of what John wrote in Revelation chapter 18 about that widow. For her sins have reached unto heaven. And you can see here that the word heaven in the New Testament is the Greek word number G3772, Uranos, meaning heaven as the abode of God, his temple. Revelation 18:5, for her sins have reached unto heaven, and God hath remembered her iniquities. And then verse 7, how much she hath glorified herself, and lived deliciously, so much torment and sorrow give her. For she saith in her heart, I sit a queen, and am no widow, and shall see no sorrow. And Anna in the temple with Jesus, on his 8th day, the prophetess and widow. And the name Anna is connected to Hanukkah and the menorah. Well, the sun and the moon and the planets on God's clock are prophets who have been prophesying since the beginning of time. Otherwise, why on earth is just about every end of days prophecy watching, rapture watching channel out there watching every sign in the heavens they can find right now? They are studying the prophecies and the prophets. It's because the signs in the heavens prophesy to us. I've even seen channels going back thousands of years to see if they can find the prophecies of our two great luminaries, the sun and the moon, to see if they can pinpoint the eclipses during Jonah's time. This is a quick fun story. I had already seen a date on paper, on my timeline, that was 80 days before the next great American eclipse, and it was there for a few reasons. January 19th, or the 18th, starting at sundown, and I felt it was a signal for everyone to get into their upper rooms and spend some quality time with Jesus. Because I'm really feeling that this 40-day leap day date before the eclipse is important. So I was sending out what I was calling Jonah's 40-day warning cry. Yet 40 days, get prepared, and get into your upper rooms with Jesus. Then, just before midnight on New Year's Eve, God suddenly gave me a message to check your signal. So I jumped on Stellarium and saw it. The signal of the moon and Uranus at the hind foot of Aries on that very day, in the wee hours of January 19th. I still remember posting on my community page all about what was going on that night. People probably thought my cheese had fallen off my crackers. And I think I deleted a lot of it when I cleaned up my wall. And it was so crazy because at that moment, all the fireworks in the neighborhood started blasting off for New Year's at midnight. I ran outside to see the fun, and it was all so surreal because it was very stormy skies, and the clouds were all lit up angry and orange, with lightning flashing through the clouds. And then there was this gigantic drone in the sky in front of my house, probably a nearby farmer checking out the fireworks in my neighborhood. And it had this massive green flashing light on it. The whole experience just felt so unreal and so fun. I didn't even know back on New Year's Eve that it was also the very place on God's clock in the heavens where the sun was, on that hind foot of Aries, when Jesus really did meet with all the apostles in the upper room. It was all just too insane. Then, after the signal I saw of the warning cry from Jonah and the 40 days in the upper room, we've got Leap Day, when I see another signal. Then 40 days to the Great American Eclipse, which is also the last day of the Jewish year. And on my timeline, those 40 days between Leap Day and the eclipse represent the 40 days of Noah and the flood. So we could be headed into some serious times here, especially when I consider this other sign in the heavens that I'm seeing now, that I believe could be the sign of Revelation 15. I can't find anything else like it in Stellarium. And it even falls on the very date that made me fall right out of my chair. So stay in the Word, everyone. Walk with God every moment. And as Paul told us, bring into captivity every thought to the obedience of Christ. Such beautiful words from Paul. So last video, I was showing the heavenly matchup from Jesus' time to what's been happening on God's clock over these past 7 years. First, we had this whole blood moon thing on November 8th of 2022, which was exactly 42 months to the day after Israel celebrated turning 71. And these days, the sun rises at that hind foot of Aries on May 8th each year, in that same spot as those blood moons 84 years apart, and also matching the exact spot on God's clock of Resurrection Day and Jesus meeting the apostles in the upper room. Yeah, the sun was in that same spot on May 8th when Israel started their parties back in 2019. And then that blood moon, exactly 42 months to the day later, was the longest blood moon in 33 years. Then, exactly 333 days after that blood moon, Israel was attacked. Then I felt a little nudge from God to look harder. On the day that Jesus was crucified, and you can believe whatever you want about some other year he was crucified, but you will not see what I'm showing here. This is sundown beginning the Passover of 30 AD. Also, there would never be a total solar eclipse during the crucifixion either. But I can assure you that as Jesus Christ hung on that cross, it was the darkest day in history. Jewish tradition has always been that they begin Passover at the full moon, and you cannot have a solar eclipse on a full moon day. The moon and the sun are on opposite sides of the planet when a full moon happens. And I'm also not going to try and change thousands of years of Jewish tradition and say that Passover used to be on a black moon day. I trust the Jews know what they are doing, and I'm not going to argue with them about their most holy days. So, on Crucifixion Day, we have Jupiter, the king planet, exactly on the chord of Pisces, the fish, exactly where this upcoming great American eclipse is going to happen. And at the crucifixion, we had Uranus, a planet called Heaven, sitting at the king star Regulus in the heart of Leo, the lion. And that's right where the first eclipse happened back in 2017. And biblically, that first great American eclipse most likely also represents the day in the Bible when Joshua came face to face with the commander of God's army and received his instructions concerning the sacking of Jericho, the city of the moon. And I can just see it happening back in 2017 too, when Joshua comes face to face with the commander of God's army and asks, "Whose side are you on?" And the commander says, "Neither." And Joshua fell on his face to the earth. That's from the book of Joshua, chapter 5. And then, to top it all off, during the crucifixion, the messenger planet Mercury was sitting right at the 7 stars of the Pleiades, like in his right hand. And then, right after the resurrection, when Jesus had risen, the messenger Mercury went retrograde to go back and meet up with the sun those following days. And I probably forgot to mention last time, but also at the crucifixion, it looks like Pisces the fish was giving birth to Venus, the new bride, to usher in the new age of Pisces and the fishers of men, and the new covenant of the new church age. And I suppose the most important sign in the heavens on that day was that as the sun set in the west, and they were putting Jesus into that tomb, the completely full moon was rising in the east, right at the foot of Virgo, which is the Revelation 12 sign in the heavens, with the moon at her feet. And the idea of Virgo being clothed in the sun is because as long as the sun is in the sky, you can't see the stars. But the moment the sun went down, all the stars of heaven appeared, and there stood Virgo on the horizon with the moon at her feet. Which also on Leap Day coming right up, although it is not a full moon day, but when the moon rises over Jerusalem, it is in that same spot at the foot of Virgo, 40 days before their year ends and the eclipse happens. Then I looked at the birth date of Jesus on Rosh Hashanah, or Yom Teruah, the day of shouting, and another sort of Revelation 12 sign too. And Jupiter, the king planet, was in exact conjunction with our king star in the heart of Leo that day, at Jesus' birth, and again in the king star of Leo, where that first great American eclipse happened too, and where Uranus heaven was during the crucifixion. And then we looked at Circumcision Day, 8 days later, the first time Jesus ever entered the temple in Jerusalem, on his 8th day to be circumcised. And it is an exact match to the Ring of Fire wedding ring eclipse that happened 1 week after the attack on Israel last year. Even Mercury, the messenger, is there too. In both instances, 2,000 years apart. So that gets us to this point. If Jesus was crucified on April 6th, and I'll just use the Gregorian calendar for convenience, and at sundown the Jews start the new day, the very moment at sundown when Jesus was put into the tomb started Passover, which would have started April 7th. And if Jesus' ministry had just lasted 3.5 years, like most people say, then what day was Jesus baptized? It would have been on October 7th, the date that Israel was attacked. And because of our precession cycle and how our backdrop of stars moves ever so slowly across the eons, I decided to see where the sun was rising on October 7th during Jesus' time. Because these days, on October 7th, the sun rises like on the forearm of Virgo. As you can see here, this was October 7th of 2023, the day the war started. So, I turned the clock back to see, and on October 7th, during Jesus' time, on the day he would have been baptized, the sun rose at the foot of Virgo. And it's just starting to feel like every time I look up critical dates, that either the sun or the moon is right there at the foot of Virgo. And that's right where the moon is going to be, exactly rising over Jerusalem on Leap Day. So anyway, there's that finding, that 3.5 years exactly before Crucifixion Day was October 7th. Then, since we know some other dates, like the day before the triumphal entry, I decided to roll back through those days leading up to the crucifixion. This is a screenshot of at 5 p.m. on the day of the Last Supper, and Virgo is giving birth to the moon, Israel. And people can make the sun, moon, and planets whatever characters they want in the stories. These are the characters in my stories. Then, from John's Gospel, we know that Jesus was anointed at Bethany 6 days before Passover. Well, we know that Nisan 10 is the date of the triumphal entry, which is 5 days before Passover. So this scene at Bethany is the day before the triumphal entry, when Jesus was anointed by Mary. I've written it out here with the Gregorian calendar so I wouldn't get messed up with stellarium. Nisan 15 is Passover. Nisan 14 was the day of the crucifixion, and Nisan 10 was the triumphal entry, and also the day my timeline started, on our 7-year countdown too, back in 2017. Yes, the day of the triumphal entry, Nisan 10, and also the date of the crossing of the Jordan and the birth of Israel was Nisan 10. It's all spelled out in the Bible. And Nisan 10 of 2017 is the date that my timeline begins with the 7-year countdown. The 777 Jericho key and those 7 times around the city of the moon. So, Nisan 9 would have been the anointing at Bethany, and it would have been April 1st on Stellarium. I set my time for 9 a.m. because that's probably when everyone started arriving at Mary and Martha's house. It was most likely an all-day affair, with the big day of all the apostles gathering together with Jesus, and then everyone going to Jerusalem the next day, and all that they knew would be happening, especially since the news of Lazarus had been spreading far and wide, and everyone knew that the Pharisees were after Jesus. And this is where the moon Israel was in the heavens that very morning, 2,000 years ago, looking as if Leo, our Lion of Judah, is ready to take a big bite out of Israel. On the morning of the anointing and the day before the triumphal entry into Jerusalem. And I hope everyone has been watching Eric's videos, because he showed me something miraculous about this sign in the heavens, as well as proving to me a few things about that blood moon night that I had been going on about back in 2022 in my videos as the day approached, because I thought we might have been raptured back then, just before that famous blood moon happened on November 8th of 2022. So, this is what he showed me, and this was just a few months after that blood moon sign. This was February 6th of 2023, and it looks just like the morning at around 9 a.m. when everyone showed up at Mary and Martha's house, all the apostles gathering before the triumphal entry, and Jesus was anointed. This moment in the heavens on February 6th of 2023 was the full moon. Well, so much of what Eric was showing on his channel was completely blowing my mind, because I knew how significant the events were that he was clocking in the heavens. February 6th of 2023, just last year, was a huge day in history, because during the night leading into all this and into the next day, Turkey was rocked by some massive earthquakes, more than what was ever recorded in the Levant. And the two 7.8 and 7.7 earthquakes were about 9 hours apart. And over the following months, they had over 30,000 aftershocks. And I'm sure the Rapture watchers remember this day. All those earthquakes in the shape of a gigantic 7. And it was on the Jewish festival of new trees of all days. Just think about it. And at the end of the Olivet Discourse in the Bible, when Jesus told about the end of days, in the Gospel of Luke, Jesus gave them a parable. Behold the fig tree and all the trees. And then these massive earthquakes in the shape of a gigantic 7 on the Jewish festival of new trees. So, what are the odds of all this? Jesus is anointed and about to make his final entry into Jerusalem on that little donkey, and the earth trembled. And what are the odds of everything together that I've been showing in my last videos? Well, I've got even more fun stuff. On March 13th, just a few weeks from now, there is going to be a massive, beautiful menorah in the heavens, created by God's great 7, the sun, moon, and the 5 main planets that we see. And the sun, who lights them all, is standing in the middle as the center of God's menorah. This is a rare event, because you have to have all of the planets on one side of the heavens. And in this screenshot, they are all beautifully spaced. I could back up a few hours to get the moon even more evenly spaced in Pisces, but I've chosen the 0 hour, the midnight hour over Jerusalem, of 3:13. For one, because here the moon is right where the equinox was during the days of Jesus. And here's a quick shot of the equinox and where it occurred 2,000 years ago. The equinox only moves by 1 day every 128 years, so it's a very slow-moving phenomena. The equinox will always occur in the same spot during a person's lifetime, but over the space of 2,000 years, I'll show you where the equinox occurs during our current time against our backdrop of stars. This shows you how slowly our backdrop of stars appears to move or change over time. But it's really our vantage point on the Earth that is moving, and not the backdrop of stars. 2,000 years have passed between these screenshots. To find the two equinoxes for any year on Stellarium, it's easy. Just get that red E on the sun, and you have your equinox. Because the equinoxes are marked on the days in the spring and fall of each year when the sun rises exactly due east. And as I've said before, the red cardinal points of north, south, east, and west on Stellarium, if you have them turned on, is the horizon line. So the big red E is where the sun will rise due east on the dates I'm showing. So that's one reason I've got the moon sitting where it is on God's colossal menorah in the heavens when the clock strikes midnight for Jerusalem on 3:13, just a few weeks from now. 3:13 is also the third day of the 13th month on the Jewish calendar this year, so I thought that was pretty cool. But there's something else here. For one, I need to say that no one is going to see this menorah, because it is veiled by the sun. As long as you are staring into the clouds midday, you won't be able to see any of our stars of heaven. The clouds will obscure your vision, and the sun will put a veil over your eyes, much like a bride before her wedding. We don't get to see the stars of heaven until the sun goes down and the veil is lifted. So this great menorah of God's seven will not be visible because it's all lined up with the sun. And because I've always been a huge prophecy watcher from many cultures, long before I met God and started reading the Bible, I've always been a big fan of an 800-year-old prophecy by Saint Malachi, of the prophecy of the popes. It is 112 cryptic verses that seems to match up with many of the last 112 popes. And the final pope, through the counting of the 112, is sitting in office right now. He officially took the title and position of the pope on 3/13/13. So that's just more reason that I've set my clock for this incredible rare menorah in the heavens to the 0 hour of 3:13. If you don't know the prophecy of the last final pope, it reads, Peter the Roman, who will pasture his sheep in many tribulations, and when these things are finished, the city of 7 hills will be destroyed, and the dreadful judge will judge his people. The end. And to add more to this whole story, on February 11th of 2013, within hours of Pope Ratzinger announcing his resignation, when a pope had not elected to resign in 600 years, and possibly 800 years, Popes are well cared for and very wealthy, with scores of writers doing all the real work, no doubt. Well, just a few hours after he made his announcement, lightning struck St. Peter's Basilica twice. And then, on 3/13/13, the last pope stepped into his position. Then, on October 7th, of all days, back in 2016, and exactly 1,335 days after those first two strikes, St. Peter's Basilica was once again totally rocked by such a massive lightning bolt that it was reported to have shook the whole area. People saying it felt like an earthquake, and one shop reported, after having windows rattled, said it was as if the air stood still. It was such a shock. Yes, Daniel's 1335 days between those lightning strikes, if you count those days of the strikes. And I think the big rooster just crowed for St. Peter for a third time on October 7th of 2016. And exactly 7 years to the day later, on October 7th of 2023, the war began in Israel. Another fun thing happened on Pope Peter the Roman's birthday just a couple of months ago, on December 17th. Another giant lightning bolt struck a statue of St. Peter outside a sanctuary in Argentina, where the Pope is from. The lightning bolt literally pulverized the key in his right hand, as well as the halo on his head. So I like those numbers of 3/13/13 a lot when the last Pope stepped up. And then on 3/13, God puts his grand menorah of 7 in the heavens at the midnight hour Jerusalem time, and no one will ever see it coming. And only 13 days after I've been feeling like Noah's flood might begin. Revelation 15. And I saw another sign in heaven, great and marvelous, 7 angels having the 7 last plagues, for in them is filled up the wrath of God. And they sing the song of Moses, the servant of God, and the song of the Lamb. May we all find shelter beneath his wings.